On today's Locked On Predators, we're going to talk about a few of the players we thought we'd see more of, but didn't.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Tuesday episode with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everyday listeners who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us Monday through Friday. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend a part of your day with you. I am Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
On today's show, Emma and I are continuing to work through our season superlatives, but today we're going to talk about a couple of players who started the season in Nashville but finished in Milwaukee. We got to talk about what happened with Phil Tomasino and Juuso Pärssinen. We're also going to talk about a couple of other faces that we briefly saw in Predators Gold and what their small glimpses tell us about maybe their future in Nashville. Before we dive into all of that, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Emma, we've got lots of players, information, and superlatives that we want to dive into. And today we're kind of calling this the group of misfit toys, the island of misfit toys here, because these were some players that maybe we thought we would see more of, but didn't quite fit in, or we saw glimpses of, but we're not 100% sure what their future's going to look like. Before we get into that, though, real quick, want to touch on some news that Alex Doherty from the Tennessean broke, that the Predators are not going to re-sign assistant coach Dan Hinote. He was on an expiring contract. Nashville has opted not to renew that contract. Little bit sad about this, Emma, just strictly for pure energy and entertainment purposes. Dan Hinote, love his sideline interviews, love his energy in practices. What did you think about this news?
Yeah, it is sad. You know, I love Danny Hinote. I think to know him is to love him. He's just a ball of energy all the time. Every time you see him, like no matter time of day, no matter what has just happened or hasn't happened, and he'll always greet you with a hi friend. It's always hi friend. And I will say I'm gonna miss that. I'm gonna miss that a lot. I think he will absolutely get picked up somewhere.
100%.
And I really don't think that it's I would venture to guess it is not because of anything that he has, that he and Brunette didn't get along or anything like that. I think it's purely just Brunette, this is his team. He's the head coach. He already, when Dan Lambert left with John Hines, Brunette brought in Derek McKenzie, who's one of his handpicked assistants. And I imagine that's probably what this is going to be. It's just, he wants to get more of his own guys in there, which is understandable. It's his team. He can do that. And, look into the one thing that's kind of hard to overlook when you're talking about Danny Hinote is that he, was in charge of the team's penalty kill.
Right.
Which didn't do that well this year. The Predators finished 22nd overall on the penalty kill. It was at 77%, 77.1, I think. Not great. And that was a little surprising, to be honest. And I think it usually had been an area where they had kind of thrived, but I think that a lot of it has to do with maybe getting someone in there who's going to fit Brunette's system a little better, maybe a little more offensive minded to help run the penalty kill that way. But yeah, we're gonna miss him. We're gonna miss Danny Heinen.
Yeah. Great energy. Great. Like you said, great personality, great energy all of the time. I know some people are kind of like, hey, maybe this is Carl Taylor's opportunity to get involved in the Nashville Predators system. I think this is going to be somebody that Andrew Brunette brings in that he has worked with maybe before or has some sort of longer term working relationship with. So that is what I anticipate that we'll hear when they make some sort of announcement, as an addition to the coaching, the coaching staff. I think it will probably be a handpicked, like you said, Andrew Brunette person. So we'll wait and see. But until then, Danny Heinen, again, I'm with you. He's going to land somewhere and it'll be great to see kind of what he does. Talking about people landing somewhere and let's see what they do. Hey, friend, let's talk about Phil Tomasino. This is one of the hardest players for me, Emma, to talk about this season because so much happened and I'm still not 100% sure how to put it all together and make a narrative that totally makes 100% sense to me. So we're going to talk about Tomasino, of course, this season, 41 games played, 7 goals, 13 assists, 20 points. He was a -6. Started out, like we said, here in Nashville, ended up going down to Milwaukee and finishing the season in Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, he played 22 games, 11 goals, 7 assists, 18 points. That's in the regular season. Of course, he is still playing with the Admirals as they are in the Western Conference Finals right now. So if you had to award a superlative to Phil Tomasino, if you had to somehow summarize his relationship with Andrew Brunette and the new system and this season, how in the world would you encapsulate this season for Phil?
It is hard. It's a hard one. I would say, like, I don't really know how this would be a superlative per se, but almost like
our rules anyway, we want it to be one.
Most likely to be on probation or something. Like, I just feel like he
Yes.
not in a breaking the law way. I mean, as far as I know, he is a law abiding citizen and young, good stand up young man. But it just seemed from especially the end of season media availability with Andrew Brunette and the way that he talked about Phil Tomasino, that was pretty surprising even to me. Not that I really had a strong opinion the other way, but I don't think I realized how Tomasino was seen, in the eyes of the coaching staff there. And Brunette said something to the effect of, we want to, you got to be able to, if you want to play on this team, you have to be able to put in the work, and skill alone isn't going to get you where you want to be. And you need to be able to put in the work. And I thought that was pretty pointed towards Phil Tomasino. And again, he did not strike me personally as someone who was trying to get by without putting work in. But again, I don't know him as intimately. I don't see him as frequently as the coaching staff does. So it seemed like he had kind of been, the gauntlet had been thrown down for him. And it's just like, all right, buddy, like you have officially been called out in a public forum. And I think it's now going to be, all eyes are going to be on him even more so to see how he responds to that call out.
When it came time for a superlative, I'm just here to show my age, Emma, with this superlative. Okay. I'm voting him most likely to be a Cracker Jack box toy surprise. Because growing up, do you please tell me you know what Cracker Jacks are?
Yes. I'm not that much younger than you, Anne. Okay. Yes, I know what Cracker Jacks are.
My favorite. So I loved Cracker Jacks growing up, but of course the best thing was what are you going to get in the box? There's a secret toy surprise inside, and I hated the peanuts. So I would pull the peanuts out. I would eat the caramel popcorn. But sometimes it could be something really, really cool. Like one time I remember getting a plastic ring. Don't know why I thought that was cool, but it was jewelry. I thought it was great. Or you could just get one of those holographic stickers, which was a disappointment. And I feel you kind of dig through the box and root out the peanuts to get to whatever it is. And I feel like we are still digging in the Cracker Jack box to find out what is Phil Tomasino? Is he like a super amazing plastic decoder ring, or is he a holographic sticker? You mentioned Andrew Brunette's comments on Phil Tomasino at the end of the season. I'm going to play that video here just so that everybody can hear in his own words what Andrew Brunette had to say about Tomasino and his season and his future with the Predators. This is what he had to say.
Yeah, the reports I've got, he's played real well down there. I think it's probably been good for him. I think up here, we talked about it mid-season where we felt for his development to have an opportunity to be the type of player we believe he can be. He needs a little bit more. He needed more ice time. He needed a bigger role. He had to grow a little bit, both on and off the ice, I think, a little bit. And from all reports I got, he's right on course. Now, in saying that, for me, I think he needs to grab the little of our identity that we've created here, and he has to have a little bit more of that in him. And if he can, and if he puts the work in, and he's relentless, then his skill will take over. But if he, at different times this year where he wanted the skill first without the work, I'm not sure he has a chance to play for us next year. So we're building him. I think it's, like I said, it's been really good for him. This playoff run will be really, really critical for his career, and I hope he rises to the moment, and I believe he will.
So definitely some very direct comments from Andrew Brunette when it comes to Phil Tomasino. Coming up, Emma and I are going to kind of break down those comments, tell you what we think the takeaway is when it comes to Phil Tomasino and Andrew Brunette. We're also going to talk about another player that started in Nashville and ended in Milwaukee, Juuso Pärssinen. What did we see from him? All that's going to be coming up here in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. The Stanley Cup Finals are set, friends, and it is a perfect time to get in on the action with FanDuel. If you feel like Matthew Tkachuk is going to have a great finals, or you think Connor McDavid is going to show up and finally win that championship, you can check out all of the action on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we are talking about the mystery that is Phil Tomasino and the future with the Nashville Predators. This past season, Emma, I don't think really gave us a ton of clarity on what is going to happen with Phil Tomasino. Again, Andrew Brunette's comments want him to grow a little bit on and off the ice, skill first without the work, talking about, will he have a chance to play with us? When you hear Andrew Brunette say these things, what are your takeaways?
I mean, first of all, I don't want this to sound like too doom and gloom. Like Andrew Brunette has already, made a decision about Phil Tomasino's future, because I truly don't believe that he has. But I will say, after those comments, that was probably the least confident I have ever felt about Tomasino's future with this team. Yeah. Not saying that he can't rise to the occasion. I'm not saying that he won't put in the work, or that, his fate has already been decided. But I think that it's maybe a little less of a sure thing than people thought. I know that he had that great rookie season, when he came up in his first full NHL season, and people had such high expectations for him.
Yes.
And he has really just failed to meet those. And he was, one of those guys that, man, people really hated. The fans really hated that he was in Milwaukee at any point during the last two seasons. They're like, why is so-and-so in the lineup when Phil Tomasino could be in there?
Yes.
And I think to Brunette's point, he is a guy that they want to have playing like big minutes. And it's better to do that in the American League than to do that in the NHL. because if you're in the NHL, if he's in the NHL, he's not going to be playing those big minutes. He's going to be like on the third line and not really playing in those kind of situations. And that's not going to be good for his development.
You have to remember that this isn't just Andrew Brunette's perspective on Phil Tomasino. This was also something that John Hines and David Poyle, Andrew Brunette, and Barry Trotz have kind of all agreed that, like, hey, this is somebody who needs more time in Milwaukee. But I'm with you. It feels like maybe Tomo's leash is a little bit shorter now than maybe it was a year ago, 2 years ago. And it's going to be really interesting because, again, you have here a first-round draft pick. He's got tons of offensive talent. You know, when he was drafted, the thing that everybody talked about was his speed. That's a huge thing for Andrew Brunette. But Andrew Brunette wants a very well-rounded game from his players. And as you listen to Brunette, I think about that relentlessness that this team played with. And I'm not sure we saw enough of that from Tomasino before the plays, you know, to kick off the plays, to get the puck. And so for me, I wonder if it's more of that like physical engagement, that sort of tenacity that Brunette feels like Tomasino is maybe waiting for that to happen to kick off a play or to finish a play. And that's not going to be enough for Andrew Brunette. You know, he wants a much more well-rounded 200-foot game from them. Interestingly enough, you know, playing in Milwaukee, Brunette mentioned, you know, this playoff series in Milwaukee, this is going to be really important this postseason. He's played 12 games so far as of the time of this recording, 4 goals, 0 assists. He started out very, very strong in their first kind of postseason games, but he hasn't scored a goal since game 1 against Grand Rapids. You know, 3 of his goals came in the first round against the Texas Stars, and then he's been a little bit quiet. And he's one of those players, if the Admirals want to be successful against Coachella Valley, you know, he needs to be clutch. So there's a little bit of pressure on Phil Tomasino, even if he's not in gold. Right now, there is pressure on him, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Emma. It's a little nerve-wracking because isn't he is no longer waivers exempt, is he, after this
Correct.
season?
He is
so
not.
It becomes a whole different thing, my friends. You can't just start him in Nashville, hope for the best, say, yeah, it's not working, he needs more time in Milwaukee, and guarantee that he will end up in Milwaukee. This, you know, I don't even like to say it out loud, but heaven help us if we have the whole Ellie Tolvanen debacle 2.0.
I was just gonna say, now, like, Nashville has been scarred by the waiver wire so many times. And yeah, it's hard. Like, I think though that it was the right move to send him to Milwaukee. You talk about being clutch. You talked about, you made a really good point about one of the things that Brunette looks for is your play away from the puck. And so it needs to be, if you're not scoring goals, fine, but like, we still need to be impressed with whatever else you're doing out there. Like, if you're not scoring goals, but you're winning battles on the boards and you are making plays and you are, you know, you're fast and you're breaking up plays and things like that, I'm okay with that. But I think it's got to be more about, like, if you're just one of those players, and I'm not saying that he is this, I'm just saying, like, if he's a player that he either scores goals or he disappears, then Andrew Brunette's not going to want that on his team.
Another player that we need to talk about that's kind of in a sort of a similar situation, but maybe less pressure, is Juuso Pärssinen. He is, of course, 2019 7th round pick, which is a little bit deceptive, I think. I feel like Juuso Pärssinen, people say, oh, a 7th round pick, they found this diamond in the rough. I think Juuso Pärssinen had a lot of attention. I think he's a very high quality player, but I think he had an injury that scared a lot of people off, where he dropped some in the draft. But he started in Nashville, started on the top line with Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly in training camp in the early part of the season, and ended up in Milwaukee as well. So when you look at Juuso Pärssinen's season, Emma, what is sort of the superlative that you award to him?
Well, I have to be honest, because this is a superlative that I think a lot of people probably would have given to Cody Glass. But I'm going to say, for me, and I hate to say it, but Juuso Pärssinen was my biggest disappointment from this season, because he really did just kind of come out of nowhere last year and shocked us. And of course, there's a risk with that, right? You're like, can he maintain this level? And he couldn't. Not saying he can't ever, but he didn't this year. He struggled, and that's, that's okay. He's in the stage of his career where you give him a little bit longer leash, like you said, than Tomasino at this point. He doesn't have a full NHL season under his belt yet. Pärssinen doesn't, and so you kind of give him a little bit of a longer leash. He was dealing with, I think the fact that Brunette did put him on that top line to start the season shows that he really does believe in his ability, and he believes that he can be the kind of player that they need him to be. But maybe that was just a little too much for him just at that time. And I think that he, like, once he kind of had his coming out party last season with the Predators, I said to myself, and look, I love Yakov Trenin, but I'm like, they don't need Yak anymore if they have this guy. Like, this guy is Yak but better, because he can score and score more than Yak could. And I mean, he's huge and he's physical, and he, but he doesn't, so he can get guys off of pucks, and that's a big thing that Andrew Brunette wants to see, is like, if we want the puck. So a lot of that is moving guys off of it and trying to get it. And so that's something that Pärssinen that's a big part of his game, is his size and his physicality, and he can use it very well, but he's also extremely skilled. And I think that we just saw him, he was kind of a shrinking violet this year a little bit, and that I have faith. I think that he will come back stronger and he will come back better from this, but I think it was like, all right, he wasn't quite ready yet, and that's okay. But you mentioned Tomasino not waivers out or waivers exempt anymore. You know who else is not waivers exempt anymore?
This is awful.
Juuso Pärssinen, Phil Tomasino, Egor Afanasyev. I mean, the list goes on. So it's starting to get a little, we're realizing how fortunate we were in Nashville to have all these guys, like these kind of young, highly touted guys that we could just send up and down as we please, because they're waivers exempt, but we're not going to have that luxury next year. So, yeah, it'll certainly be interesting, but I really do think Pärssinen impressed Andrew Brunette at training camp, obviously. And that was even, I don't know if you remember, Anne, but he was dealing with an injury for a decent part of training camp. And that was after being injured last year for a big, like, for the most of the second half last year. And so he's dealt with some stuff, but he impressed Andrew Brunette. I think Andrew Brunette really likes him and likes the kind of player that he is. I think he just needed a little more time to marinate. I think he needed to get his confidence a little bit. So I think, I think he has a longer leash than Tomasino. I have very high hopes for him, because he was genuinely one of my favorite guys to watch on the team last season before he got hurt.
He does have a very specific role that he can play on this team. And I'm with you. I feel like Andrew Brunette just wanted to give him more opportunity to develop. For me, his superlative is most likely to have that sophomore slump. And I think that's maybe a little bit of this year, but he was given so much. I mean, he was put on the top line with Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly. That is a lot. This season played 44 games with Nashville, 8 goals, 4 assists, 12 points. Interestingly, when you look at his goal breakdown, 3 of those 8 goals were empty net goals, which still count for a goal, but they were empty net goals. Let's see what he can finish doing in Milwaukee in the postseason. I'm very excited to see him in the training camp, Let's see what happens with him. I'm with you. Hate the waivers situation that we're in. This is very uncomfortable for me, but let's see what these guys do in training camp, because you just have to kind of wait and see how are they going to fit in. where is Andrew Brunette going to use them? And it feels like, as my grandmother would say, sometimes you got to poop or get off the pot. Like, what are you going to do with these guys?
Yeah.
That's
We've
what
got
really-
several guys in that situation right now, though. And like you said, I think it is important to remember, because you watch Pärssinen out there, he looks like a man among boys. I said this so many times last year in his debut season at the NHL level. That wasn't just his NHL debut; that was his first professional season.
Right.
And I think that I need to frequently remind myself of that when you watch him. And that's why I say he's got a longer leash, because it's like you watch him play and you're like, oh my God, this guy, put him on the top line, but then you do that. And then you remember, like, oh yeah, he really hasn't had this kind of, this much time to develop. So that's why I'm not as nervous about him. I think he will get there. I think he just didn't have the development time that a lot of these other guys have. So, but yeah, he's definitely one that I'm excited to watch at training camp.
Yeah. Coming up, Emma and I are going to talk about a couple other players who got to see a little bit of ice time in Nashville. Some may be back. Some we may never see again, but it was really nice to have you. We're going to talk about those players coming up here in just a moment. All right. So, Emma, you mentioned a player earlier that we definitely need to talk about. This is fan favorite, Egor. Everybody loves Egor Afanasyev. Everybody loves Egor Afanasyev. He came up last season, played 17 games around the time that the Predators were dropping like flies. This was at the end of the 2022-23 season. He's 23 years old, 2019 second round pick. Everybody, it feels like in Nashville, is waiting. They are waiting for the coming out party for Egor Afanasyev. When is Egor going to make the roster permanently in Nashville? Bless. Egor was called up to Nashville, only played in 2 games. He was up here a little longer than this, played February 13th in a loss to the New Jersey Devils. And then, gosh, give this man a cupcake. He played the February 15th 9-2 loss to Dallas. Bless his heart. Welcome to Nashville. I hate that for Egor. I really do. But this is another one of those players where we've seen just glimpses of him. And I think everybody is waiting for, is he going to be a permanent fixture? And another one of those players where what happens in the postseason in Milwaukee could affect what Andrew Brunette kind of goes into training camp thinking of him. He led Milwaukee in the regular season, 56 games, 27 goals, 27 assists, 54 points. That's a career high for Egor in goals, assists, and points in fewer games than he's played in Milwaukee. He has been very good in the AHL playoffs, 12 games played as of the time of this recording, 5 goals, 9 points. Second only to Zachary Leroux, who is just, I don't even know what's happening with Zachary Leroux, but I will have some of what Zachary Leroux is having.
Yes.
Because he's been incredible. But, so Egor is doing great things in Milwaukee. He's doing great things in the Milwaukee postseason. Why can't we get him in Nashville full time, Emma? Is that coming?
I don't know. And that's the thing is, like, we got him and we're like, okay. And when he was called up to Nashville, it was like he was, it was him and Jankowski. They came up together and they had been playing extremely well with each other in in Milwaukee rather. And then they, were thinking, okay, this is the time. He's got the mojo going. Let's keep that. I feel like the last thing you want to do with a guy who's really feeling it like that is to bench him. And then that's exactly what happened. And it's like, right. And then he just kind of lost it after that. And it just seemed, to me, it was a little confusing that why they would make that call up. Egor Afanasyev, you don't call him up to put him on the bench, especially when he's playing lights out in Milwaukee. And it didn't make sense to me. And I think that was kind of a misuse of resources with that. And then, of course, a game like the Dallas game, the 9-2 game, that is one that will really take the wind out of your sails, no matter who you are, but especially if you're a young player that's looking to, finally get their shot at the NHL level. And that, really unfortunate series of events there for Egor. But like you said, he's been back in Milwaukee, and he's done very well in the playoffs for them, which is really good. I think he's one of those guys that you just want to be like, just give him a chance, because I will say last year, you mentioned when he was called up at the end of the year when everyone and their brother was injured or traded, and he was it took him a while to get that first goal.
Yes,
It took him
it did.
a while, and it was kind of the thing, the elephant in the room that no one talked about. He finally got it, I think, like 2 games left in the season or something. He finally got that first goal. I don't know what exactly it is. I mean, I think it's a handful of things that are, where it's making it difficult for him to really have that transition from the AHL to the NHL. But I think a lot of it is definitely confidence. And,
Yeah.
if you're going to call him up, just play the kid.
Again, this is somebody who is no longer waivers exempt. So Nashville has to decide, are we going to go all in on him and give him a longer opportunity in Nashville? Are we going to start next year with him in Milwaukee and hope he hits a point where we feel like, okay, we're going to bring him up and he's going to be a key piece moving forward? Or is this going to be somebody that the franchise lets go of? And I think that's going to be one that is not met with a lot of understanding, probably from the fan base. That's going to be a tough one if Egor does not continue on with this franchise and they lose him for nothing. I think that's going to be a tough one. Just 2 games, but man, he was like giving a kid a bite of their first Hershey bar. Yaroslav Askarov. We got to see him in Nashville. Of course, this wasn't his first foray into the NHL, but he played 2 games, came in for the third period in a Carolina loss for UC Saros. Did not allow a goal in that point in time. But then he got the start later on in that week at a back-to-back against the Washington Capitals and got this win in a shootout. And I'm not going to lie, Emma, I don't know when I have been so stinking delighted for a player in a really long time. It was great to see him get that start against Washington. It was wonderful to see him get that win. I loved him being able to make a stop against Alex Ovechkin. I mean, can you imagine having watched Ovechkin growing up and then, being able to face him and make that stop in the shootout? It will be really great to see what happens with Yaroslav Askarov. But for me, most of the questions are about off ice and about front office decisions, almost more so than him on the ice as well.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that, the talent is there, the skill's there. That's not a question. Like,
Right.
he's otherworldly, some of the saves that he makes, but I don't know. Like, we've talked about Brunette's system a lot, and I know that doesn't directly impact the goalie, but kind of indirectly impacts the goalie.
Right.
And he's got such a unique style. If you're the kind of goalie that's going to be that involved in the play as he likes to be, then that system does impact you a little bit more directly. And I just think that that's part of it, the on ice component. But then off ice, like you said, he's lost his starter's net twice in the playoffs, 2 years in a row, in the Calder Cup playoffs. From a player development standpoint, that doesn't worry me really, but from a mental readiness, like, again, development, as far as like the skill development, I think he's developed. He's there. But there's more to it than that. And so I think that, there's maybe a little bit more of a question mark over him as we move forward here, as far as, is he ready for the NHL?
I refer to him as a 2 Tums goalie, because anytime I know Yaroslav Askarov is going to be in net, I'm like, and just take 2 Tums, because he causes me such anxiety and angst. But I'm with you. Skill set is really next level. There's no question that he has the skill set, but there is an element of goaltending that is, I like to call it wizardry. There is a mental component. There is just a whole nother level that we'll need to see from Yaroslav Askarov. We are going to get into our defenseman superlatives coming up this week, so be sure to tune in. Emma, before we sign off today, let everyone know where they can find you and find your work.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, same handle, Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work online at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Predators. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.